Two, one. Hey guys, we're live. welcome to another episode of The Good Life. So glad to be here. Got the boys with me. Stu, Kobi, what's up, guys? Say hello to
Yes, sir.
everybody. Hope
Can you hear
everybody.
me? Can you hear me? We're live.
We're live. I can hear you, man. Stu, can you hear us? Maybe. Maybe not. Stu's coming. Eventually, he's going to get here. But either way, until that time, we're making it happen, guys. Thank you for everybody that's joining us. LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. We're here again another Wednesday night giving you our takes on health, wealth, love, and happiness, the good life, the things that we actually need to pay attention to, listen to, change our mindset on, any of those things in these areas. Tonight, we're going to have a great conversation around the topic of loss. The topic of loss. Powerful conversation. I'm sure a lot of us coming through 2020, it's a year, right, that there was a lot of loss for people. So just one of those things that we've got to take control of, we have to pay attention to in order to really get to the good life. So that's the conversation tonight. I'm gonna toss it to Stu, because Stu, you were the one that was kind of, milling over this and saying like, hey, I think this is something that we should definitely talk about. So, open it up, man. Start with some of your thoughts, and we'll dive in.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So, the topic of loss came up the last couple of weeks, and loss, the way we've kind of broken it out for this call, we've kind of focused on three different categories. I think just real simple to start off, just typical wins and losses when it comes to any venture, any business you're trying to start, any change you're trying to make, just whatever it is. Could just be like, a relationship you have with somebody, like the wins and losses, and how to effectively recognize when a loss has happened, how to deal with it, move forward, all that. That's category A. Some of the other things we're going to get into tonight are the loss of a loved one and what that means, and how you can and learn from that and reflect and take some of that and apply meaning to your life. And the third one we're going to go into today is loss of identity during some type of transformative process. So I think there's two big loss of identities in those transformative processes that I think we'll really dive into, and maybe some more will come up. But I think the first one is losing your identity when you get into a relationship with somebody, to harp on that love component of what we talk about here in the good life, keeping your own identity versus losing yourself into a relationship. And the second one is, as you try and make a change, what type of loss do you go through from who you were before to who you're going to become? So why don't we just go ahead and break it down? Let's go ahead and break down the wins and losses, but more focused on the losses. Like, gentlemen, like when you have losses and like the changes you're trying to make in the businesses that we're going here, how do you approach that? How do you handle it? What's your inner dialogue? I'd love to hear a little bit of that.
Yeah, man. This is before I go into that, I almost kind of wanna hit the elephant in the room a little bit. And that when I hear losses, right, I didn't immediately think losses in terms of losses like business losses, whatnot. I thought more so in terms of losses and like deaths, really, like losing somebody, or losing or a life, right? Um, and I think I've spoken to you guys individually, and I'll go into some detail, but not too much here. But just to give context to what I'm saying, I think recently, in the last 2 weeks or so, there's been a lot of deaths around me, and what I mean by that is people that I know, people that are close to me or loved, and also people that are close to me also losing people themselves. Um, some I won't go into the details because they actually asked me not to share on social airways. But in a situation where it's kind of like tough to reconcile the environment with like the loss to the individual, right? And there's also I think probably the closest would be my good friend who passed recently. And um, specifically speaking of sudden losses, right, where it wasn't one where you could brace for, where you could prepare for, where you could kind of like make a plan for and to go through, but one where it's all of a sudden like the carpet got ripped from under you, and there was no real clear indication of like what's happening, or like you don't have answers, right? You don't have answers. You're in a state of confusion, a state of flux. And I think what it really does, and I want to, again, the question and the conversation, all this is like, what does it do for you as an individual, and what really, what else you guys want to say to it? But what I kind of took away was just how it called into question my own individual vulnerability, right? More, not in terms of like I'm gone, but more in terms of like, wow, things can change very quickly, and not all of it is under my control. In fact, most of it isn't,
Yeah.
right? And how do I make peace with that? Um, I think for maybe men in general, but I don't know. I'll speak for myself as I think a black man, and growing up how I did, it was I kind of went to a state of like numb action, if you will, right? Where it's like I'm turning off all the senses because there's things to be done right now. I need to get some things done. But I think I never really returned back to the point of healing, right? I never picked that back up. So, I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that, or uh,
Yeah.
express, from your perspective when you've experienced loss.
I mean, I'll dive in, only because, as kind of, I don't know if I can call myself an anomaly, but I haven't really lost any person that's been very close to me. My grandfather, I lost him. He was the closest person to me that I've lost. But even then, it was like you expect loss to some degree, right? One of the things that you said could be is like when it feels like the rug is ripped out from under you, right? That type of loss. When I think of loss, when I think of being able to handle things that are taken away, it's the things that are unexpected, the things that like are like, oh, what, that I didn't expect this to go down this way. I didn't expect that person to pass away. I didn't expect that relationship to fail, or whatever we're going to classify as loss. It's because it wasn't expected. I think we could all handle the loss when we come to terms, when we come to peace with it, when we know that's part of the progression, when your business has run the course, right? You've given it 15 years, and then all of a sudden you're like, it's done. Well, that's a form of loss, but you accept that loss because it's like, what, we did what we needed to do. In the form of, losing a loved one or losing a friend or somebody like that, that's unexpected unless they were terminally ill, right? And they said they only had X amount to live. Then it's hard, but it's not as hard. So when I think of that word loss, when we start going down this conversation of loss, it's really about, for me, like kind of expectations, managing, it's tough to manage the unexpected. But there's certain things in our lives that we do have to manage, and they won't be the wins, they'll be the losses, but we can still manage them because we expect them to come. We know that they're going to be there. So that's kind of how I think of, if you just take it to a higher, kind of bird's eye view, that's how I think of losses in general. And as we dive into each of these topics, I really think it's just a matter of what's our expectation on this side, right? Like, when we talk about wins and losses, what was it? Was it our expectation to win, or was it our expectation to lose, right? Like, and how do we feel about both of those sides? So, it's kind of my take on it, Stu.
Okay, so I guess just addressing kind of where we're at in the conversation, I say we go ahead and shift into loss of a loved one. And for me, I had, my folks were born in '48, so I had a lot of like older aunts, uncles. Just a lot of older individuals, especially over in Australia. And, I started having people pass away that, they're on the other side of the world. So you don't really get to go to the funerals. You don't really get to be a part of the community who's in mourning or in celebration of this person's life. So really early on, like, I just was very quickly aware of kind of like what you were getting at, could be like the fragility of life, like just how vulnerable it is, how fragile it is. And what was interesting is, I didn't really know what to do with those things when I was a kid, but I just started to get the sense of it could happen. Most of those were anticipated. You start hearing about a family member not doing so hot or whatever. It makes it easier in some ways, but it wasn't until I had a car accident in junior year, actually back when I knew Kobi. And
hit the gear.
Actually, no, I fell asleep while driving.
Oh, no.
Different car accident, different story, different time to go into that deer one. A lot of deer in Virginia. No, this one actually fell asleep while driving because I was actually hustling all the time. I had swim team. I remember Khabib calling out my bicep for the first time when I finally was putting in work on the swim team. Anyways, I was doing swim team in the morning, swim team at night, hustling to get the grades, half-hour commute back and forth, and I was always fighting fatigue. And all of a sudden one day I just, lost control, whatever, woke up, I'm already heading towards a tree. I do a double barrel roll. And I just realized man, my head just hit this steering wheel at 45 miles an hour in this 1987 Cherokee with no airbag working. So literally to me, I was like, damn, it could go like that. So to me immediately it made me just keep in perspective, you can have all of these huge life plans, but are you enjoying the process? Mm-hmm. And I think that is what loss of loved ones and that near-death experience I had really made me just keep in mind, just how valuable time is. And I just know a lot of people that are all about the retirement plans, which is a very, very smart move. But are you enjoying what it takes to get to your retirement? Yeah, so I think that's really what kind of framed everything for me. What do you guys think?
Let me throw out a question really quick to that point, Stu, and to that story. Does it take us getting close to loss to appreciate loss? Is that the only way that we'll, as human beings, appreciate it? Do we have to have someone close pass away to feel the fragility? Do we have to get in a near-death car accident or experience for us to be like, man, this is is that just a human trait? Do you think we all just take that for granted? Either one of you, right? Just those are my kind of thoughts as I go through.
No, I don't think it's the only way, but I think it maybe speeds up the process. All right.
It's how most people learn it, though, right? What's the other way that people learn it?
I would say I think there are other ways where they learn what
learn the importance of life, or how the impact of loss, of losing something or themselves or someone, learning that lesson. Does it only come when we get close to loss, or right, we're face to face with it, or is there another way to learn that lesson before we get to that place?
Maybe not that specific lesson, right? Maybe you don't get it kind of like you would that, where it's just is one of those things where actually there's many things that it's similar but not the same, yeah. Right? So I think my head was going towards a wake-up call of some sorts, right? Yeah. And so you get wake-up calls to different degrees based on different life incidences. So when it's that close to what we perceive in our understanding as the end, right, that would then make sense that it would be the ultimate wake-up call. So yeah, I think in some ways maybe for that specific type, mm-hmm. Yeah, that might be the only way. But I maybe I have more faith. I just feel like there are some that are able to pull from seeing others lose, to some degree. It doesn't have to happen to you before you get to, but then again, I can see how it would be to that level. Parents who say you'll never know what it feels like to lose a child. Don't you even try to understand, Yeah. So I get it. I just could also be the pain talking.
True. I just see it in all, we're talking about loss tonight, but again, just, for the show's sake, the good life, I see this in all these different areas, right? Right. People don't pay attention to their financial life until they lose the job, until something crazy happens, and they're like, oh, yeah, I should pay attention to this. People don't pay attention to their health until them or somebody close to them gets sick, like,
Right.
or like has some health issue, and then like, oh, I should probably pay attention to this, right? It
Right.
happens in all of these areas. Not till you realize how important mental health is that you have a breakdown, a nervous breakdown, you have massive anxiety, you go into a crazy depression spin before you're like, I should probably start paying attention to, right? Like, I feel like this is like a trait of human beings to just be like, well, I got to feel this in order to know that this is the way that it's going to be. And we don't take these clues from anybody else.
Yeah. I think you hit a good point there, Chris. I think you hit a really good point. And I'll build on that by saying, or pull from that by saying, I've been sharing that in the health, from the health perspective, that the first step is a solid food vacation. But not hearing what you're saying, I'm thinking the first step is actually a wake up call, right? To actually see, why on earth would I do any of that?
That's right.
Like, why would I even take that? Why would I do any of that?
That's
right.
It.
And I think that's probably, clarity in kind of what most of what maybe what all of us do is that in like providing enough education so someone knows, oh, I should actually do this, right? Like, I actually need to do this. Like, this isn't just some like, thing that's far off in the future, or that sick people take on, or that broke people take on, or like, no, you need to put money in the bank now so that you can withdraw if and when whatever that thing is happens.
That's right. I second it, right? Like, it's just what I see all the time. Stu, you brought up like the retirement planning stuff, right? And it's like, for probably good 3-4 years of my career, I would just post articles and facts about how bad it is financially for people. And I got this reputation a bit of being like Debbie Downer, of like, oh, you just bring bad news. And I'm like, I just don't think people understand how bad it is, like what you're headed towards. I just don't think that that's the case. So that's why I'm going to put that out there. So that could be your wake up call of like, maybe you just read enough articles, watch enough videos, see enough things to be like, oh, well, this is an issue that I should pay attention to. And so that's always my hope for people, is that with the education of understanding where people are in their health, in their mindset, in their food, right? Like in all those things, then maybe you get closer to making that decision to say, I'll go on a solid food vacation, I'll save money for the future, I'll go to therapy, whatever, right? Like, it's by presenting that information. So
I think that's right on the head. Go ahead, Stu.
Piggybacking off of that, thank you. You had asked Chris if there was another way to get there. And I think that in order for you to truly like feel it and appreciate it, like to your core, I think it does have to hit a little close to home. But I do think you can get close. Learning from other people's examples is a powerful thing to do. It's a very smart thing to do. But you still don't have that added motivation of, I've been bitten by that before. That's different. But I think there's something else. A lot of like the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, like a variety of different individuals often talked about daily concentrating and meditating on the fact that you will die one day. And it seems at first like it's a Debbie Downer conversation. It's like, bro, I don't want to think about that. It's like, actually, if you don't think about that, how are you going to use your time? What are you going to try and accomplish before you go? Because I think a lot of people get lost. I feel like that like people's 20s can be such a fun time, but it disappears in a heartbeat because the priority, and I can say this from experience, the priority will be fun and pleasure, which is limitless. There is no end. There's always raising the bar. But when you stop and think, man, I will pass away one day. So I can't just have fun all the time if I want to do X, Y, and Z before I pass. So it all of a sudden brings a slight sense of urgency to whatever your bucket list is. So that whole meditating on the fact that you will die every day, that came from all the way back in ancient Rome. Today, the way I've seen this most commonly portrayed is individuals like Gary Vee, who are out there just reminding people like, hey, you want to get motivated? Remind yourself that you're going to die one day. because
I was
or
literally
else
just
you're
thinking
gonna
of Gary V.
he hammers this point home, and I'm so glad he does, because it gets so overlooked. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many people that are just putting off doing whatever it is they want to do. Why? You're just getting closer and closer to that date. You may unfortunately have that rug ripped out from underneath you if you're not careful. And then in your final moments, what are the things that I wish I had have at least started? So I think, to me, that's how you can take this whole loss of a loved one, near-death experience, contemplating on the fragility of life, to help you figure out, like, what is it I want to knock out and get started with in life.
That's huge, man. That's huge. I just think that's, hit the nail on the head again, man. Like, what is it that you're trying to take out of this thing, and understanding that at some point you will not be here, right? At some point you have to live your life knowing that, like, at some point, right, loss is inevitable, leaving, moving on, right? It's inevitable. So are your priorities in order? What is it that you're doing, right? Like, hit the nail on the head, Stu. What did you have to that, Kobi? I thought you might have had something.
Yeah, the what you were saying, what you said first too, in terms of not feeling right, or the taking away the pain, just reminded me of just the central that a lot of new issues really arise from us breaking the law of nature of cause and effect, right? Where let's just go to health real quick, where we now start to consume things, and instead of feeling in our body that, like, oh, that's not for me, we consume them and aren't able to cut the signal of the symptoms and continue to consume them, right? And then,
You're talking about like unhealthy, like, food and substances, where our
yeah,
body's like
let's just
trying to
say
tell us.
food. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, let's just simply say food. Like food, our body is the most intelligent machine on this earth, period, right? Most intelligent. It will tell us everything we need to know if we allow it and we actually listen. But what's happened over time is that we found ways to override that signaling process, so we don't feel that pain, so that there's no sense of loss, right? There's no sense of, like, oh man, or I've lost energy. Something is gone. Something's gone from me. But we just deal with those symptoms, and then we're able to just kind of like come back and make the same things over and over again, which then causes what we are actually more concerned about, which are the symptoms of further disease, right? So I think that in a way too, I think though loss and pain and that feeling that is painful and unpleasant, it does play quite an important role, and I think that's what we're all highlighting. And I'll even say, I think it existed way, 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 way before ancient Rome. I think it was, you can actually see it in cultures of, like, what leads one in for example, I can speak to African cultures, right? Ghanaian culture specifically, of like humility, of like being, because we're talking about in the sense of like do it now versus also like, oh, why are you being it's the other side of that, of like, why is this so important right now, like when we know kind of in the direction that things are going to go and the role that you're supposed to play in life, right? Like the end of the Lion King type of situation. Like death is a part of, it's a cycle of life, right? It brings by the new Simba type of situation. So I think it plays a really important role, is what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Without it, where's the urgency? Without it, what is the meaning of life? It simply cannot be significant if death was not a thing. If we were all immortal, then, man, so you can waste your time. There's no timer. There's no hourglass. So, all right. Anything else with the loss of like a loved one or anything like that before we hop over to like something a little bit more practical towards the business side of things, of losses, just in the categorical, like, wins and losses, and how to handle those and react to those.
Let's move on.
Go for it.
Let's do it. All right. So what I absolutely love about the whole wins and losses discussion, and I think that the whole category, or the whole idea of being a sore loser, like, for whatever reason, we talked about like learning from other people's mistakes. I learned very early on to not be a sore loser because of watching what it did to other people's lives to be a sore loser. We're talking ruining friendships, ruining the game, taking the fun out of it, not focusing on the lesson learned, and just having a terrible negative vibe about whatever happened rather than focusing on what could be improved upon. So what do you guys think? How do you personally view, handle, respond to losses as you move about your ventures?
I mean, I'll jump in quick. For me, not too high on the highs, not too low on the lows, right? Like that's just a principle I live by. Not too high on the highs, not too low on the lows, right? Like because life is going to give you the ups and downs and you're going to have the wins and have the losses. It comes with both. Your emotional state and how you choose to handle those things, especially as an entrepreneur, but in general for everyone, how you choose to handle it will dictate how you go through it. If you are riding high on every single win, and then you are getting low on every single low, your life is going to be chaos, right? There's no way to manage that because that is the nature of it, right? Like whether we're talking business, whether we're just talking things in life in general, wins and losses is the way it's going to happen. It's your ability to actually stay pretty even keel. If you look at most people that live an extraordinary life, the good life, a successful life to whatever degree that is for you, they're probably not overly emotional one way or the other. If you get to know them or whatever, they probably show emotion, right? Because we all have it, but they're probably not overly emotional when they make the $100 million. They're probably not overly emotional when something crazy, catastrophic happens to their business or in their life, because they have to learn how to regulate those things. And I just think that that's really what it comes down to. It's your ability to regulate how you take the loss. Like you said, Stu, you learned early not to be a sore loser and what that looks like, right? Like, and why you shouldn't be a sore loser. At the end of the day, it's the same thing in sports, right? Like Tom Brady, this last Super Bowl that he won, was in the locker room while everyone's celebrating, just packing his stuff up and getting out of there. He's like, I'm good, right? Like he's been there. Not too high on the highs. It's another ring. He might go down as one of the greatest, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like he could have been in there popping bottles and going crazy. I know we saw him get drunk afterwards on the boat, the parade or whatever that was, right? But like at the moment, not too high on the highs. And most likely when they're taking losses, not too low on the lows. There's another week. Hey, we'll come back. Hey, we got to get better. And that's the trait of a champion. That's a trait of somebody like that. So I always keep my eye to those types of people that handle wins and losses. And I really think it's about, again, regulating those emotions, because the losses are inevitable, but it's how you're handling them, how you're able to navigate them.
I think that's well said, Chris. And I'll build off of that by saying I'll maybe say the same thing in a different way, right? Is that I'm committed, not attached. Okay. And committed to winning. I'm not attached to that, what the results is. I'm and I think that's been pretty present for me recently, actually, and really taking things in stride. But I also want to make the distinction that doesn't mean that you're not expressive. That doesn't mean that you don't enjoy yourself. That doesn't mean that, because I've made that mistake in my life where, being committed, not attached is kind of like, is like a okay, you're cool thing. It's all right if things aren't cool. It's all right. Right. Like you can create spaces where you can take off the mask and say, listen, things aren't going that well. It is what it is, so I think I've made that mistake in the past, but generally, yeah, definitely committed, not attached. But that doesn't mean that you can't be expressive or be, human. I was just talking to a buddy of mine who, and Chris, right after that, I was just talking to a buddy of mine who was just talking about this exact same thing, and that he realized that he just does not receive help. Like people reach out to him and he's got this, super brother syndrome going on, right? You know what I'm saying? Super brother got this, type of situation. And it's like, why are we doing that? And why are we taught to do that? Go ahead, Chris.
No, I actually kind of forgot my thought, but it was something along the same. I was just agreeing with what you were going to say. It wasn't even saying anything else, but go ahead, finish up, or Stu, jump in.
Well, I think something just, did you have a point to finish with that, Kobi?
No.
Okay.
I'm complete. I'm good.
So I think something else, like when it comes to how you handle the losses, like I really, really resonate with, managing like the highs and the lows, and like just keeping the whole thing kind of even keel, or else the whole time you're doing this back and forth thing. And like you said, that's chaotic. And that is 100% how it might feel when you start off as an entrepreneur. Is chaotic, because like you've had a lot of lows and you're like, oh shit, I just gotta win. And it's big. But eventually the more reps you get, the larger your sample size, the more you realize that like each and every individual occurrence, whether it's a win or a loss, really aren't as significant. You already have the momentum. You're already building up the reps. So I think just keeping in mind that each, like, well, actually, even keeping in mind that it's just one occurrence out of all of the ones you're about to have. It's okay. It's not a big deal. What can you learn from it? Because I think the biggest thing that gets in the way of people focusing on the lesson learned is having some type of blame or guilt or regret around what could have been to have it be created a win. So now you're having all of these thoughts rather than just simply focusing on what's the lesson learned. Remembering, like you said, mistakes are inevitable. You cannot change the past. What's the lesson learned? Boilerplate thing I talk to all my clients about. Like, just get rid of regret and get rid of guilt by taking those three things. So the other thing that really comes to mind one more time with the wins and losses is just the fact that what is your definition of winning? To me, like, I was not the most athletic kid growing up. Actually, I think I'm beginning to reach my athletic prime now at 29 years old, which I'm like kind of hyped about. But when I was growing up, I was not the most athletic kid in the world. So for me, I just really quickly defined, like, I'm not really going to try and like out strength this 6'8" guy that I'm buddies with. So for me, my definition of winning is I'm going to go out there, have fun, and I'm going to get better. So like, to me, that was always it. So I think that when you're looking at, like, if you were to make this like about client conversion, for example, or getting a sale or getting a lead or whatever, if you're only focusing on whether or not you get the client, if that's your definition of a win or a loss, man, you're just setting yourself up for heartache. If at the end of the day, like, if you're out there getting yeses and nos, you're on the way to getting that yes. I think that's one of like the most fundamental sales strategies in the world. Like, just get yeses and nos. Just get out there on the field and do it and try it. Because at the end of the day, you're getting experience from it. So I don't even view losses. Not perfect. I very rarely do I view a loss as anything other than, okay, this was an attempt. What am I learned from it? Because it's going to make me better and better the next time this comes up.
Yeah, I think that's huge too, right? Like, just understanding micro wins and micro losses, macro wins, macro losses, right? Like, just when you were saying that, I was thinking about, because I was just having this conversation with the person that does marketing for us in my business. I was just talking about like the fact that we move quickly with putting out marketing, and we do some paid advertisement and that type of stuff. It's like, I've had so many ads that have failed, so many marketing things that just, they didn't bring in anything, like it just happened. But I've also had a few that have been wins, that have hit, and then I know that that's going to hit. And I was like, I always get these butterflies in my stomach right when I'm about to put some money behind some paid ads, because I've seen them hit. I know what it's like to win on that side, where you put $5-10 a day behind something and it starts bringing you 30 leads a day or week, right? And it's just coming in. And then all of a sudden, like, you're on top of it, money's pouring in, and you really made it happen. That was a win. I know the other side of getting very excited about ad, getting all the creative together, getting the video together, be like, this is perfect. This is going to hit. I know it is. And you put it out there and you put even more money behind it because you think it's going to hit. And then after 5 days, nothing, right? I've had a lot of those too. Those to me, though, are micro wins and losses, right? None of them are like catastrophic, gonna change, like, gonna absolutely either tank my business or take it all the way to the moon. But I'm constantly evaluating those wins and losses. And like you said, like, I just don't put as much stake in them, right? I don't put as much stake in taking a loss on paid advertisements, right? I don't take as much. And I think we always have to evaluate, one, what is winning, right? How do we classify winning? right? In that scenario, for me, winning was getting more leads, right, from that ad. Loss was not getting them, right? Like spending money and not getting that return. But at the end of the day, micro, and like you said, I took the lessons. I learned. I started to understand, well, why didn't this work? Why didn't that? Was it the creator? Was it the copy? What did I change? Was my targeting off? Right? And then you just keep perfecting the model. And again, back to my point of just not too high on the highs, not too low on the lows. Like I could have on some of those that I didn't do well on those ads, be like, I'm never running ads again. Right? This is not for me. Right? You could just put too much stake in that one thing, and it really didn't have that big of a deal. Right? It wasn't that big of a deal. So we're always going to have these micro wins and losses. And I think people have to understand that, like, you have to be able to see, like, this is small potatoes. Like, yes, I wish it would have turned out the other way, but tomorrow's another day. We just keep moving, right? We just keep going, not too high on the highs, not too low on the lows, just keep going through the process. And I just really think that helps people get through it. It helps for sure me get through it. I'll tell you that. So.
You know, I as you're talking, man, I'm finding that I definitely agree with everything that's being said. And then I also have the thought, like, well, what if it does feel big? Like, you know, like what if it does actually feel really big? Like, what are the strategies? What do you do then?
I mean, honestly, like, you know, that's still back to the, maybe even yours, right? Like, what is it? Are we committed? Or are we attached?
Committed or attached?
Right?
Yeah.
Like, big it may feel big, but like,
right.
What's big, right? Like, let's keep going down the path. Like, what's big? Like, what is it to you? Are you committed to like this outcome or whatever this is going to do? You're attached to, right? I think it's really just diving in. Everybody's situation's a bit different.
Right.
But if it does feel big, then put your all into it. And regardless of which way it comes, you'll live to see another day. You know,
Yeah.
If we're not talking like life or death things, right? If we're not talking like, you know what I mean? Like this.
Well, we may even be, man. I'm going that far. I'm going that far, and I'll say that that's why this is almost kind of like it's a practice, right? So when that big, that what it feels big, and there are ones that are, you know, not everybody you're going to lose is going to be that feel the same. Not every business loss is going to feel the same. Not, you know, it's not all going to feel the same, but what I often forget and have to remind myself is that the approach is the same, right? The Tom Brady won those 7 rings in different ways, but the approach was the same. All right. And taking on that practice day in and day out is what's going to prepare, right? We'll never be fully prepared. Right? I'm no, you know, you never be correctly prepared, fully prepared or whatnot, but then you get better at it when those times hit. When those times hit, you can actually maintain the practice of committed, not attached, of managing the highs and the lows. That's how athletes live, right? Super Bowl, oh yeah, just another day, you know, at the park, and we know we playing football. And then it's like, so I used to make fun of. I was like, dude, say something more interesting.
Right? Well, that's how they think, you know. Yeah,
it's great stuff, though. I'm just like, man, that's perfect. That's how we should live life. Another day at the park, you know, appreciate our players, and then move on. But you do celebrate too. You do toss trophies over boats when you win your 7th ring too. You know,
very true.
I love that example because, you know, from like the traditional, just let's talk about NFL and the traditional American, right? Who's really into it. Like the idea of being a part of a winning NFL game, like you're like, how are you not excited about this? Like, or how are you not distraught by this loss? And it's like, you got to remember that this person has been in the trenches for years, for decades, winning and losing football games, knowing that every win, there's something to learn, and every loss, there's something to learn. Don't get bogged down by it. You got next week to think about. You got a brand new high school, brand new college team, brand new NFL team with a completely different strategy to fuck you up. So go ahead and focus on the lesson learned, not the emotional. Like on some of those losses where they feel bigger, give yourself a little bit more time to process that emotion, but then come back to the, you know, for me, just can't change the past. Mistakes are inevitable. What's the lesson learned? To the point where you sound like a robot when you're talking about wins and losses.
That's huge. That's huge. I'll take this down the path of the financial losses. This is why people suck at investing, right? People suck at investing because they can't manage their emotions. When you make that big investment and you lose all confidence in your investing because you weren't thinking about it from a long-term strategy of like, hey, I'm gonna keep investing because investing's the way I'm gonna build wealth. Most people are just thinking about it like, this is gonna get me, right? What I talked about at the very beginning of this, like managing your expectations, right? Like at the end of the day, you throw that money into that investment, and again, this is where it could feel big, depending on who's listening to this, right? You drop 50 grand into an investment and that was like your 50 grand, like that was it, right? But you were like gung-ho, like this is the investment, and you lose it. It may be a big deal for you. Like you may but regardless, even in that scenario, you can still go make more money. You probably learned something about betting 50 grand on something that you could lose, right? Like you probably learned some things about betting your last dollar or taking a risk, or right. You picked up some things. Now you might not go right back to investing until right away. But at the end of the day, you learn some things, you learn some lessons. And that's what you always have to start to take from the losses, right? The losses. Hopefully that wasn't, and again, it's the people that in the same investing way, it's the people that invest small, right? That take the losses. You take the $1,000 loss, you take the $600 loss, you take the $2,000 loss, you get the $10,000 win, you get the $7,000 win, you take the $10,000 loss, right? You keep going before you get to a place of investing 100 grand or 50 grand into something. So you would have experience, just like you said, Stu, with people that play in the NFL or any profession. You have experience with losing. You have experience with losing. There was, that just, as I'm saying it, there was a team. I don't know I think it was a high school team or somebody that was like, there was a player, was it Zion maybe? Zion, like somebody like didn't lose at all in like their whole career, like their whole high school, like college career.
Kareem?
Was it Kareem?
Kareem, yeah, Kareem won on all.
It was, but either way, it was someone along those lines. I can't remember exactly who, but like somebody like didn't lose at all. And so their first taste of losing was such a big deal because they had never felt that loss before. They didn't know what it was like to lose a game. They're like, well, I've been winning my whole life. Then I get here and I lose, and they don't know how to handle it. It's because they didn't have the reps, right? They didn't have the consistency of doing that thing. And so that's also, again, just what it comes down to is continue to do it so you get the wins and the losses. You get both sides of the coin so that when you get to the next stage, you've learned so much about how to handle the loss, what the lessons to learn so you don't take the losses or whatever the case is, that you're more equipped for it.
Mm-hmm. For
so
sure.
What I'm hearing, fellas, and you jump in here, is practicing the mindset is what I'm hearing, right? And that's really all we can do.
1,000%. Like again, guys, for everyone listening, like almost everything we do is mindset, right? Like almost everything we do, and it's shifting it and changing it and understanding a different perspective, and then actually putting action to those things, right? Like saying, okay, I think I was presented new information, I can change, I can learn, so let me just start taking action towards these things. But it's all about how you view this, your lens of life, your emotional, your EQ, right? Like all of those things are the things that will prepare you for losses, for down times in your life. Like you can't expect your life to be on a straight path, straight to the top forever. Like you're going to take it. So how are you navigating it? How are you navigating these losses? That's what we're trying to get to. And yes, like Kobi said, it's a mindset thing. This is how do you view this? And then, taking action from there.
Mm-hmm. You guys ready to move on to the last one? Loss of identity during like transformative times?
Let's do it.
Cool. So for those that are just kind of tuning in, I like this category a lot. I break it down into two types that we'll probably have time to get into today. When you jump into a new relationship, could be with a really, really close friend, could be a romantic thing, and you begin to lose pieces of who you were. That is a loss of identity, or at least loss of pieces of your identity. Now, they may not always be bad. Take somebody who's going from single or bachelor partying all the time to someone who's in like a committed, more meaningful relationship. That individual is letting go of certain things that may or may not have been serving them. Now, you can take that too far and totally lose track of yourself, get lost, and realize you may be on the wrong path. But I think I'd love just to toss out, like, what are some experiences that you guys may have found about any loss in identity regarding relationships?
Man, I was actually going to see if Chris wanted to go, because I wanted to take it in a slightly different direction in the sense of not loss of identity and relationship, but loss in identity as in when you let something go that you held on to, right? So, and for example, individuals who hold on to how they eat as part of their identity. So, and if it were to make a change, that would be a loss of identity. So it's not really even about it's about everything else surrounding it, that it's part of who I am as an individual. So if I lose that, if I change that, if I do anything to that, who am I anymore? Right? Am I even Lebanese if I don't eat Lebanese food? Right? You know what I mean? It's kind of like that. It's part of the identity. I think that. And so, yeah, I wanted to take it in that direction. And if you got anything to riff on there, or go back.
I'll go that direction too, because I can think of it that way. There's kind of like two different examples I'm thinking of, and then for sure, Stu, I get back to the relationship side too, because
it's open. Yeah,
it's important. Like from a business standpoint, I always think and I've told people this too, in financial services, right? When you switch industries, when you switch jobs, right? When you switch careers, you are attached so much to who you used to be in the industry, that because you spend so much time there, it becomes this part of you. And then you try to move. And I've said this to people, like, you get a year, 18 months into your new thing, you lose your identity, because that old thing, like, you're now a year removed, 18 months removed, 24 months removed, but you're not fully comfortable in the place you're at right now, because it's so new. It's 18 months in, 12 months in. You actually do lose a bit of your identity. You don't really know, this kind of piggybacks on what we talked about last week, like some of the questions entrepreneurs ask. Am I going in the right direction? Is this really for me, right? You start to lose that part of yourself coming from where you came from in order to get to where you're going. There is that road that you travel that's like, is this right? Am I right? Do I even know what's going on? Like, God help me. Like, what's going on here? Like, that's a real place to be, right? And that's from a business standpoint, moving careers, moving jobs, stepping into entrepreneurship. From a personal standpoint, my wife wouldn't mind. She's not listening, but she wouldn't mind even if I did say this, right? her whole life, her entire life, she was a businesswoman. She was a hustler growing up, like, entrepreneur minded. Like, that was her identity. Her identity wasn't even about having children or having a family. That wasn't a part of what she always saw. She could probably envision it, but that wasn't her thing. We had a child, and she lost a bit of her identity. Like, she couldn't associate with being an entrepreneur, hustler, getting out, because she had this baby that she was very attached to. And now she's stepping into motherhood and stepping into this other role. And she's like, wait, but I've always been I've always provided for myself and my family, like, to make money. Like, in the early stages, like, my wife made more money than me. Like, she was the breadwinner for a long time in our relationship until we got into business together, basically. Right? And that was always her identity. Now she steps into motherhood and she's like, who am I? Like, what is this? Like, this isn't what I do, to the point that I've maybe given this story before, like, to the point that we're in business together. We had our daughter 3 months in, 4 months in. My wife's like, you're the stay-at-home dad. I'm going to work, right? Like, she was like, I'm doing the business. You could stay home here because that's what I need to get back to. She was trying to get back, right? She just didn't know. A month and 2 months later, she comes home one day and is like, I just want to be at home with my daughter. I can't think about anything else. Like, I got to let this go. Like, and she had to come back, right? That nature fighting herself of like, who am I? What am I supposed to do? Was real because she stepped into this new world of motherhood. So again, losing identity, losing who you were attached to, who you were from a job perspective, career perspective is real. Also life things, stepping into motherhood, stepping into fatherhood, taking care of parent, like any of those types of things, you have to let go of who you thought you were, once were, all those things. So those are two areas that for sure this loss of identity thing really plays a big role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one that I can really relate to in there was your 1 year to 18-month transformation of like, becoming an entrepreneur, becoming a business owner, because, your whole identity has to change. Like, if Joey's still in here, she's an awesome bartender down the street at American Social. That was honestly my identity outside of work. Like I would crush it at work, and then I would go out and I would have a hell of a good time. I'd be there a lot. We know each other quite well. But once I started coming into my own business practice and like running it and trying to live it and embody it and represent a brand, there were so many things I had to let go of, and they were really hard to let go of. Like the, party and everything. I mean, we've had this conversation. There was a good chance I was going to go to Cinco de Mayo today, but I didn't, because this is who I'm trying to be now. And
proud of you, bro. Proud of you, man.
And I appreciate that. Thank you. I was telling him earlier, I've been fighting FOMO, but those are all things that, like, what do those really provide for me? Am I going to look back on my deathbed and think, talking to loss, am I going to look back on my deathbed and be like, man, I missed 2021 Cinco de Mayo? I don't think so. I don't think so
either, man. I don't think so.
But yeah, so like literally, like, you go from that, your work life and your personal life, and then when you start running a business, they become one. Your identity is now tied. You're, as Kobi always says, you're an extension of your business. So could not agree more. So that one really touches home.
Think about making the other transition. I don't know if we talked about this last week. The other transition is a loss of identity too, when you go from entrepreneur back to a job, right? Like if that has to happen for you, it's like, man, because the work of the entrepreneur is to promote and market, so people eventually know, like, this is what you do. Like, you're the entrepreneur. Like, you go, and then all of a sudden you land back in a job, or you land back in some employment, and then all of a sudden it's like, man, like, that was my identity. Like, I was an entrepreneur. I was a business owner, right? Like, that's what I did. So like, I don't associate with this. Here comes guilt. Here comes shame. Here comes, right, insecurity. Here comes all those things. Again, losing your identity, losing what you've attached yourself to. It's a real thing.
I like that attachment commitment thing.
Yeah, and as I'm sitting here, I'm like thinking of like, what more do I add to this? I'm like, shoot, it really, for me, just like it's like consistently keeps coming back. Committed, not attached, right? Because that's really the theme that I keep seeing. The piece, like if I leave home and I go, am I not a mother anymore? Am I not a father anymore? Am I not a brother? And I think it's just that in and of itself, that practice is difficult enough and beneficial enough that I don't know if I really need to take on much more than that, right? Because it might just be too much. But and really just remembering that practice of like, wow, this is what's going on right now. Like, what am I committed to in this situation? And am I attached to anything that I need to let go? Right. And maybe if you don't remember anything else from this, maybe you remember that simple practice for the next time that you are having what seems like a really high or a really low, right? Shoot, what am I committed to this? I'm committed to my teammates feeling like they also won or whatever. Like, that's what I'm committed to. Or shoot, maybe I am committed to fun right now and I'm letting go that it looks a particular way to everybody else. I don't know, that might be part of it as well. And I think that practice of learning to listen and tap back into yourself and really having clear, honest dialogue with your left, right brain, whatever you want to call it, is pretty key. Is what I'm hearing from both of you sharing, and I appreciate you guys both sharing and sharing openly, because I'm like working my stuff over here, from your sharing. So I'm like, shoot, I can keep the tough moments to myself for a little bit longer.
We're gonna bring those things out, man. We're gonna have to put you on the
Sir.
spot eventually.
No, it's definitely coming.
We'll get you in Clubhouse. Don't you worry.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not stingy. I'm not stingy on that. But just more so a credit to you guys for really bringing up, I think, a lot of really important examples: relationships, employment, like of family structure, all that stuff. Like, and I also, one thing that came to mind, I'll end with this, is looking at how other cultures like relate to their work and relate to other people. And for example, one of the things is in my journaling, I always list kind of in relation to who I am for others, and that's important to me, right? So, partner, brother, son, all that stuff. And then looking at those relationships, like simplifying from, if we're talking like end of life deathbed situation, like those are the things that it really kind of simplifies to a lot of those relationships and a lot of those relatedness and connections, and doing an exercise of what I'm committed to in those relationships often regrounds me as to, like, you know what, yeah, I want to be in this particular place, but right now I'm committed to X, and I'm letting go of this for now, and that's how I'm going to manage my highs and my lows right now.
Big deal. Stu, wrap us up, man. We got 2 minutes left. Was our conversation on loss, was this something that I don't know, we hit a lot of topics, so give me your final thoughts.
We did. I think we had an ambitious agenda for everything we wanted to dive into regarding loss, because there's so many different ways you can take that. But no, I think it was good. I think we addressed some of like the emotional elephants of the room when it comes to like just loss of a loved one, and just how to take that and how to really just take loss on such a deep emotional level as a reminder of the fact that we do have a timeline. So what are you going to do about it today, tomorrow, this week? Something in the near future that helps propel your dreams forward, because there is a time. And I would much rather, if obviously nobody wants a carpet ripped out from underneath them, but if it's going to happen, I want to know that it's at least happening as I build what I want to build. Not, damn, I wish I had at least gotten started. What stopped me? When we were talking about wins and losses, we were talking about, I think one thing that came up to me is like, if I think you have an appropriate relationship with losses when you are not allowing fear of failure to get in the way. Totally something we can dive into on Clubhouse. That's your teaser. So for those that don't know, the after party that we have for this is on Clubhouse. Flashes on the bottom of the screen. Follow us on there, because we get into a much more engaged conversation with everybody that's in there. We bring them up on stage. We talk to them. You can ask us questions. We can all just bounce around and learn from each other. So hop on the after party, and yeah, man.
Right. That's awesome.
Keep the lost train rolling.
We'll keep it. We'll keep it rolling on Clubhouse. Right.
For the sake of resetting energy here, we will not keep the lost train going.
Oh, it sounded so much cooler in my head. Hey, that's a loss though, but I had fun with it.
There we go.
Yes, hey, I love it.
That was rehearsed. Yeah.
And hopefully we learned something about our language right there on that one too. Guys, signing off. Jump over to Clubhouse. We appreciate you locking in. YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Thanks for joining us every single Wednesday night. We are here going live, talking about health, wealth, love, happiness, the things that create the good life. Now we're jumping over on Clubhouse, finish up the conversation there. So until next week, or until right now on Clubhouse, we'll see you guys later. Have a good one.
Peace out.